Future prediction is one of the most misunderstood elements of intuitive readings, and I've seen quite a few intuitives be misunderstood or discredited along the way. Hi everyone, this is Shiro from Soul-ution, and today we're going to look into the inner workings of future predictions. So future prediction is also known as prophecy in the church, and those who have the gift for it are known as prophets. Some will call it premonition, some will call it good feelings, bad feelings, gut feelings, or even deja vu, which I may touch on a little later. But the general stance for the one that's providing that information is to handle with great care, due to the responsibility of influence that it has on the person that's receiving that information. So when I receive a projection, I generally ask if it is all right to share, and sometimes I'm instructed not to share because the knowing of that information can perhaps derail the person from that path or deprive the person of the joy of discovery along the way. Now, the responsibility of influence goes both ways. For the client, they must also know that the mere asking of that question can perhaps even begin to influence that outcome. My general advice, though, is that it's not always beneficial to know what's ahead, and that most important thing is to be present in the now moment. Now, having said that, I'd like to share in this episode my observation and my understanding of how future predictions work in two segments. One would be the general simplified version, if you will, and the other more in-depth or a little scientific version. The general simple version of how I see future prediction is that I see it in two major categories. One, the fated, scripted outcome. For example, if JFK came to me and asked me if he would be assassinated, and I said yes, and he does everything he can to prevent it, he'll still be assassinated because the assassination was vital to sustaining his life legacy and his sole purpose. This goes the same for Jesus Christ, Gandhi, or Martin Luther King. The manner of their death is vital to their legacy. Jesus Christ even prayed the night before his crucifixion if he can avoid that outcome, and yet he knew that he had to go through with it in order to complete his soul mission. On the other hand, there's the changeable, ever-fluctuating future that is constantly changing. The best example comes from my own case study, where I had a client who had a love interest and came back from a date, booked a reading, and asked if he would call back. And I said, yes, I see him calling you back in 2 weeks. Now, make sure not to text or call him along the way. Now, she booked another reading 3 weeks later and said, hey, what happened? He never called me back. And I said, what did you do? And she said, well, I texted him. I couldn't wait. Well, this person actually did this every time, where with every session, I would have some specific information on what to do or what not to do, and anxious or anxiety took over, and she would do things to sort of mess with it or meddle with it. And I saw the future changing with every reading. So it was quite interesting, actually. But that's a great example of how your choice can change. And intuitives, mind you, are reading the energy of that person at that moment. And so what happens after the session, they must also remember that it is also open to a lot of change in a good way as well. If you don't like what you heard about your future outcome, sometimes it's good to know that you have the power to change that path. Now, there is a gray area, or I should say there is sort of the combination where the two categories overlap, the changeable and the fated outcome. And the great example is timeline. For example, if I said, I see you getting a new job next January or beginning of next year, and you end up getting the job in midsummer time. Now, does that mean I was off in that? No, it doesn't mean that. It means that I saw that was the strongest potential. Now, for that fated outcome to happen, it takes not only your choices, but it also has a lot to do with other people's choices that influence that outcome to orchestrate it to happen. So that getting the new job may be the destined or fated outcome, but the timeline could be the fluctuating or changing portion of that outcome as well. Now, getting into a little more in-depth or scientific version or observation, thanks to quantum physics, Time is now beginning to be understood a little more differently than how we understood it. Before, we understood time as the linear past, present, and future. But it's not really so, as time is sort of an illusion, indifferent in every realm and dimension. And I was trying to understand how every potential outcome already exists. All of our past in all of our previous lives sort of exist in the now. There is no such thing as a linear past or future. Everything exists in the now. And how do I wrap my head around that? So I kind of kept asking. And one of the ways I kind of got inspired to understand is like Netflix or Hulu or Prime, Amazon Prime, where those streaming programs have, when you open the homepage, all of the programs that you can view in one viewing. They all just sort of exist, but each content has 3 hours or 2 hours of worth of content, and when you tap into it, you have the full 3-hour experience, and it becomes part of your experience as you know it. And what they say is that with every possible choice, both choices, outcomes of those choices already exist. In other words, you may have thought that you turn left or right, and you have chosen to turn right. And you turning right and whatever outcome thereof is your continuous sense of experience and consciousness stream. However, the one that made the left also exists. And so when intuitives ask for future outcomes, they're essentially tapping into all potential outcomes, but the one that is holding the strongest potential at that time. And so you can kind of see that your life, the way you understand the continuity of, is because you're watching this one program that you've chosen to watch. But with different choices, you may be accessing a different program of different outcomes, meaning there are different programs already laid out for you. Kind of like in my old school understanding, choose your own ending books. You know, the old school, we read books and turned pages. And there was a book called Choose Your Own Ending Books. And with every chapter, you can choose different outcomes, and the ending will change along the way. And it's kind of similar to that. But I think, and I do want to touch on deja vu a little bit since I mentioned it. Deja vu to me was always sort of intriguing. Now, when we come into this life, we come in with an intention to accomplish certain things. Like we said, there wasn't fated or scripted outcomes. And without intention, there is no life. So there was an intention. And when we have deja vus, the way I interpret deja vu is that we sort of have an opportunity to confirm that we are on the path that we intended before our incarnation. So that's kind of my take on deja vu. So it is sort of the future prediction in one form or another. If you have different experience or different information about it, please feel free to share, because I love to expand that knowledge on that aspect as well. But the conclusion about all of this is for you to remember that you are the creator of your reality. You're not dictated by the future outcomes of your life. And so it is very important that in the end, what dictates your life as you know it should be and always will be navigated by your passion, your belief, and your sense of ownership of your choice. There's no one out there that's forcing you to go one way or another. God gave you life, and God gave you the complete freedom to make life as you want it to be. That is what source consciousness wanted you to do, because you are the extension of that source consciousness having a physical experience here on earth. I hope this helped you, and I hope this added value to your journey. Thank you for subscribing and liking this video. Please feel free to comment or make any requests of topics that you'd like me to talk about. Until the next time we meet, namaste.